In the outer arm of the Lyrian spiral, where star traffic thinned and diplomacy mattered less than survival, the ashes of a forgotten colony drifted quietly through space. To most of the galaxy, the system was meaningless. A yellow star, 7 planets, 1 fragile moon, and a settlement that had existed for less than 20 standard cycles. The Galactic Assembly barely remembered approving the territorial claim. Yet now, every major power in the region was watching the system in absolute silence. Because something about the aftermath did not make sense. High Executor Varric Tell of the Tessari, Concord stood before the massive holodisplay in the Assembly's emergency observation chamber. He had seen planets burn before. It was routine in border conflicts. But this had been annihilation. The holographic projection showed the colony world rotating slowly in space, a once green sphere now scarred black and gray. Continents charred, cities vaporized. The oceans had partially boiled away. Orbiting debris rings glowed faintly with residual radiation. Even the Concord's own weapons rarely produced damage this absolute. "Report," Varric said quietly. Across the chamber, a thin insectoid analyst adjusted the projection. The colony designation was Haven 7, the analyst said. Population estimate, 22,000 humans. Humans. The word carried little weight in the assembly. They were a young species, recently admitted to limited galactic trade networks. Curious, ambitious, but strategically irrelevant. No empire feared them. No fleet monitored them. They were simply another emerging civilization, spreading slowly beyond its birth world. At least, that was the assumption. Cause of destruction? Varric asked. The analyst hesitated. That alone made the room uneasy. Preliminary evidence suggests an attack by the Krith Dominion. A murmur rippled across the chamber. The Krith were feared across 3 sectors. A warrior empire built on conquest and dominance. Their fleets were brutal and efficient, often erasing smaller civilizations entirely. Yet even the Krith normally followed protocol when destroying a colony. They announced war, issued demands, allowed evacuation. This had been sudden, unannounced, total. Why? Varric asked. The analyst pulled up intercepted communications. A Krith patrol group entered the system 8 cycles ago, they explained. The human colony transmitted a diplomatic request. They believed the Krith were conducting a routine survey. The chamber grew quieter. What happened next? Varric asked. The hologram changed. Images from long-range probes appeared. A massive Krith battleship hovering over Haven 7. Energy weapons firing into the atmosphere. Cities erupting in light. Defense satellites obliterated in seconds. Then orbital bombardment. Hours of it. Warwick felt a tightening in his chest plates. This was not war, he said. No, the analyst replied. This was extermination. Another figure stepped forward. Ambassador Kelsorine of the Veil Coalition, a species known for their advanced intelligence networks. The Krith have issued a statement, Kelsorine said. The chamber screens flickered again. A recording began. A towering reptilian commander filled the projection. Armored scales, glowing yellow eyes. Krith warlord Zirith Kaw. His voice was deep and slow. The Dominion does not tolerate trespass within its frontier zones. He gestured toward a star map. The Haven 7 system blinked red. This colony was built without Krith authorization. It was removed. The recording ended. Silence followed. Everyone in the chamber knew the truth. The system was not Krith territory. Not even close. This had been a message. Then why humans? Someone asked. A scholar from the Orothi Collective answered. Because they are weak. No one argued. The humans had fewer than a dozen known colonies. Their fleet presence was minimal. They rarely militarized. Instead, they traded technology, medical advancements, and ecological restoration systems. Most species considered them unusually cooperative, almost naive. They will protest, the Orthe scholar continued. Perhaps even sanction the Dominion. He paused. But they will not fight. Several representatives nodded. War with the Krith required massive fleets and centuries of preparation. Humanity had neither. Varric folded his arms behind his back. Have the humans responded? He asked. The analyst checked incoming transmissions. Yes. Another hologram appeared. A human diplomatic vessel orbiting their homeworld. A message had been broadcast across the assembly network. The chamber lights dimmed. The recording began. A human woman stood behind a podium. She wore dark formal clothing and a silver emblem shaped like a stylized earth. Her name tag identified her as Admiral Helena Reyes. The title alone made several observers glance at each other. Admiral? Why would a diplomat carry a military rank? Her expression was calm, but her eyes carried something else, something difficult to categorize. We have received confirmation of the destruction of Haven 7, she said. Her voice was steady. 22,000 civilians were killed. She paused. The chamber expected anger, threats. Instead, she continued quietly. The Krith Dominion claims this action was territorial enforcement. She looked directly into the camera. We dispute this claim. No shouting, no emotion. Just certainty. Several assembly members shifted uncomfortably. Human diplomacy was usually softer than this. We have attempted communication with the Dominion, Reyes continued. No response was given. Another pause. Then she spoke again, and the entire chamber leaned forward. Therefore, she said, the United Human Systems have initiated Protocol Ashfall. Confusion rippled through the room. What is that? Someone whispered. The analyst frantically searched databases. No records. No treaties. No military doctrine. The human admiral continued. All non-combatant vessels are advised to vacate Krith frontier space immediately. Her tone remained polite, measured. Further conflict is now unavoidable. The transmission ended. The assembly chamber erupted in debate. Bluffing. They cannot possibly mean. The humans possess no fleet capable of. High Executor Varric raised a clawed hand. The room slowly quieted. He stared at the darkened projection screen. Contact the Dominion, he ordered. Request clarification regarding human response. Minutes later, the reply arrived. Another recording from Warlord Zereth Call. This time, the reptilian commander looked amused. The humans may protest, he said. They may cry for justice. A slow, predatory smile spread across his face. But they will do nothing. The transmission ended. For the next 12 hours, nothing happened. Human space remained silent. No fleet movements, no declarations of war. Even their trade networks continued operating normally. Gradually, the assembly began to relax. Perhaps the humans were simply posturing, issuing strong words to satisfy internal politics. That was common among younger species. By the 18th hour, most analysts had returned to routine operations. The Haven 7 disaster would become another tragic footnote in galactic history. Another small colony erased by a stronger empire. The galaxy moved on quickly. It always did. Then the deep space monitoring stations detected something. At first, the readings seemed like sensor interference. Mass signatures forming at the edge of human territory. Hundreds of them. Then thousands. Ships, but not civilian vessels. The analyst froze as the scale updated, then updated again. And again, he slowly turned toward High Executor Varric. His voice was barely audible. Sir, yes, I believe. The analyst swallowed. I believe the humans are mobilizing a war fleet. The chamber went silent. Varric frowned. How large? The analyst stared at the numbers. His mandibles trembled. Executor? I cannot calculate the upper limit. A cold realization spread across the assembly chamber. Outside the observation window, the stars burned quietly, unaware that something enormous had just begun moving among them. And far away, at the edge of human space, Thousands upon thousands of warships were forming into ranks, and they were heading directly for Krith Dominion territory. The galaxy had believed humanity was weak. In a few hours, it would begin learning how wrong it had been. The galaxy had never truly studied humanity. Not seriously. For most civilizations in the Lyrian spiral, humans were simply another young species emerging from the chaos of biological evolution. Curious, adaptable, somewhat reckless, but ultimately predictable. They traded. They explored. They built colonies in marginal star systems that older empires ignored. And most importantly, they did not threaten anyone. At least, that was the prevailing belief. But inside the intelligence archives of a few older civilizations, scattered fragments of data had always suggested something strange. Something that no one had bothered to investigate fully. Until now. Ambassador Kelsorain of the Veil Coalition moved through the dim archive chambers aboard the Coalition's intelligence citadel. The citadel floated within the dense blue gas clouds of the Seraph Nebula, hidden from most galactic sensors. Thousands of data cores surrounded him. Records of every known species, every war, every technological breakthrough. Kelsorain rarely accessed ancient files. But after hearing the phrase Protocol HFY, he had requested a complete historical review of humanity. The first report arrived quickly. And it was confusing. Humans achieved faster-than-light travel only 2 centuries ago, the analyst said through a holographic channel. Kelsorain nodded. That was consistent with assembly records. Initial expansion was unusually peaceful, the analyst continued. Humans preferred cooperative trade agreements rather than territorial conquest. Again, expected. So they are not a militaristic civilization? Kelsorain asked. The analyst hesitated. That depends how one defines militaristic. Kelsorain leaned forward. Explain. A new hologram appeared. It showed the human homeworld. Earth, blue oceans, green continents, clouds swirling across a living atmosphere. Before leaving their home system, the analyst explained, humans experienced nearly 4,000 years of continuous recorded warfare. Kelsorain blinked. 4,000? Yes. Images flickered across the projection. Ancient battles. Armored vehicles. Orbital missile strikes. Entire cities destroyed. Yet between the wars, another pattern appeared. Reconstruction. Human societies rebuilding faster than expected. Learning. Adapting. They fought constantly, the analyst said. Against each other. Kelsorain watched silently. Eventually, the analyst continued, their technology advanced to the point where global extinction became possible. The images changed again. Missile silos, planetary defense networks, nuclear weapons capable of ending civilization. But extinction did not occur, Kelsorain said. No. Why? The analyst paused. Because they became afraid of themselves. The archives opened further. A document labeled Terran Strategic Doctrine, Restricted Archive appeared. Kelsorain read the translation slowly. The document described something unfamiliar to most galactic powers. Deterrence. Humans had realized that if war became too destructive, no one could win. So instead of abandoning military power, they perfected it, then hid it. Weapons capable of ending civilizations. Fleets designed not to fight small conflicts, but to end wars decisively. Humans believed something unusual, the analyst explained. What? That peace only survives if your enemies fear what happens when it ends. Kelsorain felt a strange unease. Most species built fleets to expand territory. Humans, apparently, built fleets to prevent war from happening at all, by making the cost unbearable. More files appeared. Colonial policies, fleet doctrines, military budgets. The numbers didn't make sense. For a supposedly peaceful species, the humans invested enormous resources into shipyards, weapons research, strategic infrastructure. Yet they almost never used any of it. In fact, many of their colonies were intentionally underdefended. Kalsorin frowned. Why would they do that? The analyst zoomed in on a section of human policy. It was titled Escalation Control Framework, and beneath it, a single phrase appeared repeatedly throughout human military planning. First strike defines the war. Kalsorin read further. If a hostile civilization chooses to attack human civilians, the analyst translated, human doctrine authorizes immediate full-spectrum retaliation. Kalsorin felt a chill ripple through his neural spines. Full spectrum? The analyst nodded. Everything. At that moment, another transmission arrived. From the Galactic Assembly Monitoring Network. Kalsorin opened it. The message came from High Executor Varric. Urgent human fleet movement update, the screen filled with sensor data. And for the first time since the Haven 7 massacre, the galaxy began to understand the scale of what was happening. Across the human frontier, shipyards were awakening. Thousands of them. Facilities the Assembly had cataloged as civilian infrastructure. Mining stations. Trade depots. Habitat construction yards. Now those facilities were opening massive armored docks. And from inside them, warships were emerging. The first confirmed formation appeared near the Tau Lyra Gate. Observers counted nearly 300 vessels, heavy cruisers, carrier platforms, strike frigates, already larger than the fleet that destroyed Haven 7. But that was only the beginning. More fleets emerged, from hidden orbital docks, from asteroid shipyards, from deep space construction arrays previously classified as commercial. Every hour, more ships appeared. The Veil Coalition's analysts tried to estimate the total. The projection numbers kept increasing. 2,000, 4,000, 7,000. By the 30th hour after Haven 7's destruction, the estimated human war fleet exceeded 12,000 vessels. Kalsorin stared at the projection in disbelief. Where were these ships before? The analyst answered quietly. Hidden in plain sight. Human shipyards had always been visible, but no one had looked closely enough. Their civilian vessels used modular construction systems. Cargo freighters could be converted into missile carriers. Mining haulers could deploy autonomous drone swarms. Orbital habitats contained manufacturing lines capable of producing combat systems in days. The entire human economy was built around something called dual infrastructure doctrine. Civilian technology that could instantly become military hardware, if necessary. Kalsorin whispered the obvious question. Why would they build their civilization this way? The analyst answered with another human quote. One spoken nearly 2 centuries earlier by a Terran strategist. We hope we never need it. But if someone burns one of our worlds, we must be ready to burn their war machine to the ground. Meanwhile, inside the Krith Dominion, the news arrived more slowly. The Dominion was powerful, but arrogant. Their intelligence networks rarely monitored weaker species. So when the first human fleet crossed into neutral territory, Krith border stations assumed it was a trade convoy, and the fleet kept growing. Then more fleets appeared. Then the numbers stopped making sense. Finally, the Dominion's military command received a direct sensor report. 20,000 human warships were moving toward Krith space and accelerating. Inside the Dominion War Citadel, Warlord Zirith Kal watched the projections. Several commanders shifted uneasily behind him. This is a bluff, one officer insisted. Humans lack the strategic experience to fight the Dominion. Another officer nodded. Their colonies are small. Their military history is short. Zirith Kal remained silent. The sensor projection updated again. The fleet count climbed higher. 24,000. Then 27,000. The formation patterns were precise, disciplined, military. Finally, Zirith spoke. Send a message to the humans. A communications officer complied. Minutes later, a channel opened. Admiral Helena Reyes appeared once again. Calm, unmoving, Zirith leaned forward. You mobilize a large fleet, he said. But this conflict does not concern your species. Reyes looked at him without blinking. You destroyed one of our worlds. Zirith shrugged. It was insignificant. Reyes nodded slowly. Yes. Then she said something that none of the Dominion commanders expected. But it was ours. The transmission ended. Moments later, Dominion border sensors detected the first human fleet entering Krith frontier space. Not slowing, not negotiating, just moving forward. And behind it, an entire civilization's war machine followed. Back in the Galactic Assembly Chamber, High Executor Varric watched the incoming data streams. He had witnessed hundreds of wars during his long career, but something about this situation felt different. The humans were not advancing like conquerors. They were not claiming territory. Their fleets were forming a single massive spearhead, all aimed toward the Krith Dominion core systems. One target, one objective, total retaliation. Varric whispered quietly to himself, "What have we allowed to begin?" Because across the galaxy, a realization was spreading. The Krith Dominion believed they had destroyed a weak colony. Instead, they had triggered something humanity had spent centuries preparing for. And the galaxy was about to witness it, far ahead of the human fleets. The wreckage of Haven 7 continued drifting silently, unaware that 27,000 warships were coming to avenge it. And the number was still growing. The first true panic began not inside the Krith Dominion, but in the Galactic Assembly. For nearly a century, the Assembly had maintained a fragile balance between the great powers of the Lyrian spiral. No single empire was strong enough to dominate the others, and most conflicts remained small, contained along frontier systems. The Dominion had always been the most aggressive of the major powers, but even they respected certain unspoken limits. You did not wipe out colonies belonging to neutral civilizations. You did not provoke unnecessary wars with species outside your borders. Because once a conflict expanded beyond control, entire sectors could burn. And now, a young species with almost no war record had mobilized the largest fleet anyone had seen in 200 cycles. High Executor Varric Tell stood before the Assembly's tactical display as new reports streamed in. The human fleets were moving faster than analysts predicted. Not recklessly, but with ruthless efficiency. Each formation traveled in layered waves. Carrier groups surrounded by missile cruisers. Electronic warfare ships screening the flanks. Autonomous drone clouds extending sensor range across entire star systems. It looked less like a young species improvising war, and more like a doctrine that had been rehearsed for decades, perhaps centuries. Varric turned to the intelligence analysts. "Have the humans declared war formally?" The lead analyst shook her head. "No official declaration." "Then what are they doing?" The analyst zoomed the display. The human fleets had bypassed 3 Krith frontier systems without attacking. They ignored military stations, ignored patrol craft, ignored even a small Dominion outpost fleet. "They are heading directly for the Dominion's 3rd defense ring," she said quietly. Several Assembly representatives gasped. The 3rd ring was not a border zone. It was the outer shield protecting the Dominion's core worlds. No enemy fleet had reached that region in almost 300 years, and now humans were heading there, without stopping. Ambassador Kelsorin watched the projection carefully. "Why are they ignoring the border fleets?" someone asked. Kelsorin answered before the analysts could. "Because destroying them would slow the advance." The chamber fell silent. Humans were not seeking tactical victories. They were racing toward something, a strategic objective. Another transmission arrived from deep space monitoring stations. This one changed the atmosphere of the room completely. The humans were not sending one fleet. They were sending several. The primary strike force continued toward the 3rd defense ring, but 2 other formations had split away. One heading toward a major Dominion shipyard, the other moving toward a communications hub connecting several core systems. Varric studied the patterns. "This is coordinated." "Yes," Kelsorin said. "Perfectly. Meanwhile, inside the Krith Dominion War Citadel, Warlord Zirith Kal was beginning to understand the scale of the problem. A towering projection of Dominion territory hovered above the command chamber. Red symbols marked human fleet movements. They were multiplying. "What is the confirmed number?" Zirith demanded. A tactical officer answered nervously. "Current estimate, 32,000 vessels." The room grew tense. Even the Dominion's full navy barely exceeded 40,000 ships, and most of them were scattered across dozens of systems. "Mobilize the First and Second War fleets," Zirith ordered. "Recall all frontier forces." "Yes, Warlord." Another officer hesitated. "Should we issue a diplomatic channel?" Zirith turned slowly. "Why?" The officer swallowed. "If the humans believe this is retaliation, perhaps negotiations?" Zirith slammed his clawed fist against the command table. "They are a minor species." His voice thundered through the chamber. "They cannot challenge the Dominion." But even as he spoke, the projection updated again. The human fleets had just crossed another boundary. They were now inside Dominion military space, and they were accelerating. Back in assembly space, observers watched the same sensor feeds with growing dread. The galaxy had expected human fleets to move slowly, carefully. Instead, they moved like a blade, precise, focused, deadly. "They are not fighting a war," Kelsorin whispered. "They are executing a plan." The first battle occurred sooner than anyone expected. A Krith border fleet of 60 warships attempted to intercept one of the human strike groups near the Volcar system. It should have been a simple engagement. The Dominion fleet outclassed most known species. Their battleships carried heavy plasma cannons capable of melting cruisers in seconds. They had fought hundreds of wars, and the human strike group consisted of barely 80 ships. Observers assumed the Dominion would crush them. Instead, the entire battle lasted 3 minutes. Assembly monitoring probes recorded the engagement. When the footage reached the chamber, no one spoke. The Krith fleet entered firing range first. Their battleships opened with full plasma barrages. The human formation responded instantly, but not with traditional weapons. Instead, thousands of small objects launched from the human cruisers. Missile swarms. But unlike standard missiles, these moved unpredictably. They split, recombined, adjusted trajectory mid-flight. Artificial intelligence. Adaptive targeting. Electronic warfare signals flooded the system. Krith targeting systems failed within seconds. Missiles struck engines, sensors, weapons ports. One by one, the Dominion ships went dark. Some exploded. Others drifted powerless. 3 minutes later, 60 Krith warships were disabled or destroyed. The human fleet lost 1 frigate. When the footage ended, the assembly chamber remained silent. Varric finally spoke. "That was not an even fight." "No," Kelsorin replied. "That was a demonstration." Another message arrived from the Dominion. Warlord Zirith Kal addressed the galaxy directly. His voice carried unmistakable fury. "Human forces have violated Dominion territory." He bared his teeth. "This aggression will be answered with annihilation." The message ended. But observers noticed something subtle. Zirith had not mentioned Haven 7, not once. Meanwhile, inside the flagship of the human fleet Resolute, Admiral Helena Reyes stood before a panoramic starfield. The ship's bridge hummed quietly around her. Rows of officers monitored tactical displays, fleet movements, logistics, battle reports. All calm, all controlled. A young officer approached. "Admiral, Velcar engagement confirmed. Dominion fleet neutralized." Reyes nodded. "Civilian casualties?" "None detected." "Good." She turned toward the tactical display. The next target marker blinked. Dominion Shipyard, Karthus Belt, a facility capable of producing hundreds of warships each year. Reyes folded her hands behind her back. "Prepare strike package." "Yes, Admiral." Another officer hesitated. "Mom." Dominion First War Fleet is moving to intercept. Reyes studied the projection. Nearly 600 Dominion warships. Heavy battleships. Carrier platforms. The largest formation humanity had encountered so far. Time to intercept? She asked. 7 hours. Reyes nodded slowly. Then we proceed. The officer looked uncertain. Admiral, that fleet is significantly larger than our current strike group. Reyes allowed herself a faint smile. Yes, she tapped the display. Another human fleet icon appeared. Then another. Then 5 more. They were converging from multiple directions. Because, she said calmly, this is not our strike group. The officer stared at the screen. Nearly 4,000 human warships were forming a massive battle line. And they were all arriving at the same point in space, at the same time. Reyes gave the final order. Signal all formations. Her voice remained quiet, but every officer on the bridge felt the weight of the moment. Tell them Phase 2 begins, across Dominion territory. 30,000 human warships continued advancing, not slowing, not hesitating, not negotiating. And for the first time in centuries, the Krith Dominion realized they might not be fighting a small species at all. They might be fighting something far worse. A civilization that had spent generations preparing for a war no one believed it could win. And the real battle had not even begun yet. The battle for the Karthus Belt began long before the first weapon fired. Across the asteroid-rich star system, the Krith Dominion shipyard complex glowed like a crown of steel and fire. Massive construction rings orbited a dim red star, assembling warships that had fueled Dominion conquests for centuries. Hundreds of partially completed battleships hung in skeletal docks. Cargo tugs moved endlessly between ore refineries and weapon foundries. It was the industrial heart of the Dominion war machine. And now, the human fleets were coming for it. Inside the Dominion command center orbiting Karthus, panic simmered beneath rigid military discipline. Tactical officers rushed between consoles. Fleet signals flickered across massive holographic projections. The first war fleet had arrived. 600 Dominion warships forming a defensive barrier between the shipyard and the approaching human armada. Admiral Threx Val, commander of the fleet, watched the sensor data update. More human vessels were appearing. Not just dozens, thousands. What is the confirmed count? He demanded. A sensor officer replied shakily. Human forces approaching Karthus. 4,200 ships. Threx felt a ripple of disbelief pass through the command staff. 4,000 ships was not a raid. It was an invasion force. But the Dominion had advantages. Their battleships were larger, heavier, more durable. And the shipyard itself mounted dozens of planetary-grade defense cannons capable of shredding entire fleets. If the humans wanted Karthus, they would have to bleed for it. Bring all defense cannons online, Threx ordered. Missile platforms to full readiness, and prepare the fleet for engagement. Meanwhile, 30 million kilometers away, the human fleet formation drifted in perfect silence. Thousands of vessels arranged in layered formations that stretched across half the star system. At the center of the formation floated the flagship Resolute. Inside its command bridge, Admiral Helena Reyes watched the battlefield projection slowly unfold. Dominion fleet confirmed, an officer reported. 600 warships guarding the shipyard. Reyes nodded. Expected. Another officer spoke. Karthus defense cannons are active. Range envelope approximately 100,000 kilometers. Understood. Reyes studied the map carefully. The Dominion fleet sat between the human armada and the shipyard. They were daring humanity to attack head-on. It was exactly what Dominion commanders expected. But human war doctrine rarely relied on expectations. Signal Task Force Gamma, Reyes said. Yes, Admiral. A small formation of human ships separated from the main fleet. Stealth vessels. Electronic warfare platforms. Drone carriers. They slipped silently away from the primary battle line, and disappeared into the darkness of the asteroid belt. Back at the Galactic Assembly, observers watched the developing confrontation with growing unease. Dozens of civilizations had now tuned their sensors toward Carthus. The largest fleet battle in generations was about to begin. Ambassador Kelsoran stood beside High Executor Varric Tel, watching the projection carefully. "This will decide everything," Varric murmured. "If the humans lose here, their retaliation collapses." Kelsoran nodded slowly. "But if they win—" He did not finish the sentence, because if the humans destroyed Carthus, the Dominion would lose its primary warship production center, a crippling strategic blow, and suddenly the entire war would shift. Back in the Carthus system, the Dominion fleet moved first. Admiral Threx Val raised his claw. Fire. 600 Dominion warships unleashed a wall of plasma. The attack lit the void with blinding blue fire. It should have devastated the approaching human fleet. Instead, the human formation split. Thousands of ships maneuvered simultaneously. Some accelerated, others rolled sideways. Electronic warfare ships deployed jamming fields that twisted targeting sensors into useless noise. The plasma barrage passed harmlessly through empty space. Then the human counterattack began. It did not look like normal fleet combat. Instead of focusing fire on Dominion battleships, the human fleet launched tens of thousands of autonomous drones. Small, fast, nearly impossible to track. The drones spread outward in enormous swarms. They didn't attack immediately. They scanned, analyzed, mapped the Dominion fleet formation in real time. Within seconds, human targeting computers knew exactly where every Dominion ship was positioned, and exactly how they were coordinating. Admiral Threx frowned. Why aren't they firing? No one had an answer. Then the drones began transmitting. Across the Dominion fleet, communications channels filled with noise. Sensors flickered, targeting systems lagged, and something far worse began happening. Dominion ships started firing at the wrong targets. One cruiser unleashed plasma cannons toward empty space. Another launched missiles that curved wildly off course. Entire squadrons struggled to coordinate. The drones weren't just gathering data. They were rewriting the battlefield. Inside the human flagship, the tactical officer smiled faintly. Enemy fleet network compromised. Reyes nodded. Good. Human war doctrine relied on something older species rarely considered. Dominion fleets fought like warriors. Direct. Aggressive. Human fleets fought like engineers. Break the system. Then dismantle what remained. Begin precision strikes, Reyes ordered. The human fleet finally opened fire, but not with overwhelming force. Instead, each volley targeted something specific. Engines, sensor arrays, shield generators, weapon cooling systems. One by one, Dominion warships began losing critical capabilities. Some drifted powerless, others lost weapons. Some collided with their own allies as their navigation systems failed. Within 10 minutes, nearly half the Dominion fleet was crippled. Admiral Threx slammed his claws against the command console. They are dismantling us. A tactical officer shouted back. Our targeting networks are compromised. Override them. We cannot. Threx stared at the battle unfolding around him. The humans were not destroying his fleet quickly. They were taking it apart piece by piece, leaving ships disabled rather than destroyed. It was deliberate, controlled, almost surgical. And then he understood something terrifying. They were saving their main weapons for the shipyard. Just as Threx reached that realization, Task Force Gamma completed its mission. Hidden inside the asteroid belt, the stealth ships deployed something enormous, massive cylindrical structures. Human officers called them orbital drivers to Dominion sensors. They appeared as harmless debris until they activated. Across the Carthus system, gravity alarms screamed. The drivers launched their payloads, not missiles, not energy weapons, Solid metal projectiles. Asteroids, hundreds of them. Accelerated to relativistic velocity. By the time Dominion sensors detected the attack, it was already too late. The first asteroid struck the shipyard construction ring. The impact vaporized 3 kilometers of superstructure instantly. The second destroyed an entire dry dock containing 2 unfinished battleships. The third punched through a reactor core. The resulting explosion lit the system like a newborn star. Within seconds, the entire Carthage shipyard complex began collapsing. At the assembly, the projection flared white as the explosion spread across the station. Observers stared in shock. Soren whispered quietly. They never intended to fight the fleet. High Executor Varric nodded grimly. They came to destroy the Dominion's future. Inside the Resolute, Admiral Reyes watched the destruction calmly. Shipyard neutralized, the tactical officer confirmed. Dominion fleet retreating. Reyes nodded. Do not pursue? The officer looked surprised. Admiral? We are not here to conquer. She pointed toward the star map. New fleet formations were already moving deeper into Dominion space. We are here to end the war. And across the galaxy? Every civilization watching the battle realized something unsettling. Human fleets were not built merely to win battles. They were built to dismantle entire war machines, systematically, relentlessly, until the enemy could never threaten them again. And the Dominion had just lost the first piece of its empire, but humanity was only getting started. The destruction of the Carthage shipyard sent shockwaves across the entire Lyrian spiral. For the first time in centuries, a major imperial war industry had been erased in a single strike. The Krith Dominion, once feared as the unstoppable conqueror of the frontier sectors, suddenly looked vulnerable. But the real fear spreading through the galaxy was not about the Dominion. It was about humanity, because after Carthage fell, the human fleets did not stop. Inside the Galactic Assembly, emergency sessions had been running for 30 straight hours. Representatives from dozens of civilizations watched the unfolding war with growing dread. High Executor Varric Tell stood at the center of the chamber as analysts updated the star map again. 3 massive human fleet formations were now deep inside Dominion territory, each one moving with terrifying precision. Report, Varric said. The analyst pointed to 3 red Dominion systems. The humans have destroyed the Carthage shipyards, she said. Neutralized the Velkar defense fleet. She paused before continuing. And they have just eliminated the Dominion relay nexus at Orus Gate. A wave of murmurs rippled through the chamber. The Orus Gate was not a military installation. It was the central communications hub for nearly half the Dominion's territory. Without it, their fleets could no longer coordinate effectively. Soren studied the projection. They are isolating the Dominion, he said quietly. Varric nodded. One piece at a time. Meanwhile, inside the Dominion War Citadel, chaos was replacing confidence. Warlord Zirith Kal stood before a massive tactical projection showing the shrinking borders of his empire. Red markers signaled destroyed installations, shipyards, relay stations, defense platforms, all gone. And the human fleets kept advancing. How many ships remain operational? Zirith demanded. A fleet officer answered. Approximately 28,000 Dominion vessels across all sectors. Zirith bared his teeth. Then we still outnumber them. The officer hesitated. Yes, Warlord, but they are not engaging those fleets. Zirith turned slowly. What do you mean? They avoid large formations unless necessary. The officer gestured to the projection. They strike infrastructure instead. Shipyards, fuel depots, navigation arrays, supply hubs. Every target the humans destroyed weakened the Dominion's ability to fight. And they did it without wasting ships in prolonged battles. Zirith finally understood. This is not war, he said. This is dismantling. Back aboard the Resolute, Admiral Helena Reyes watched the Dominion core systems come into sensor range. The bridge lights glowed softly against the endless starfield. Around the flagship, the human armada stretched across millions of kilometers, now numbering nearly 35,000 vessels. Human industry had not stopped building ships even during the campaign. Reinforcements continued arriving from Terran shipyards. A young officer approached Reyes. "Admiral?" "Dominion Core Defense Fleet detected." Reyes looked up. "How large?" 8,000 warships. That was the largest single fleet the Dominion had ever assembled. And it was waiting directly ahead, guarding the Dominion capital system. The homeworld of the Krith. Reyes stepped closer to the tactical display. This would be the decisive moment. Destroy the fleet, and the Dominion would collapse, lose, and the entire human campaign would stall. She turned to her officers. "Open a channel." "Dominion fleet?" "No," Reyes said. "The Dominion government." Inside the Dominion capital system, the transmission arrived moments later. Warlord Zirith Kal appeared on the main screen. His expression was colder than ever. "You have caused significant damage," he growled. "But this ends now." Behind him, the Dominion core fleet drifted in massive battle formation, thousands of warships bristling with weapons. "Turn back," Zirith continued, "and we may allow your species to survive." For several seconds, Reyes said nothing. Then she spoke quietly. "You destroyed Haven 7, Zirith shrugged. "A minor colony," Reyes nodded. "Yes." Then she leaned slightly closer to the camera. "But you did something worse." Zirith narrowed his eyes. "What?" Reyes answered softly. "You killed people who trusted that diplomacy meant something." Silence filled the Dominion command chamber. The human admiral continued. "We sent settlers, engineers, doctors, families." Her voice remained steady. "They believed the galaxy had rules." Then her expression hardened. "And you proved them wrong." Zirith laughed. "You mobilized 30,000 ships for a colony of 20,000 beings?" Reyes didn't smile. "No." She gestured toward the stars behind her. "We mobilized them for something much bigger." "What?" "The principle that if you destroy a human world," she paused, "you lose the right to threaten another." Zirith's claws tightened. "You think you can destroy the Dominion?" Reyes shook her head. "No, we don't need to." The tactical screen behind her activated. A massive list of targets appeared. Dominion shipyards, defense grids, industrial planets, energy relays, nearly 100 strategic locations. "Every one of these installations supports your war machine," Reyes said calmly. "Our fleets can reach all of them within 72 hours. Zirith stared at the list. Reyes spoke again. "If we continue this war, your empire will still exist, but it will never build another fleet, never threaten another colony, never invade another frontier system, never burn another world." The Dominion command chamber fell silent, because for the first time, Zirith Kal realized something terrifying. Humanity wasn't trying to conquer them. They were trying to remove the Dominion as a military threat forever. Back in the Galactic Assembly, observers watched the exchange live. Kel Soren whispered quietly, "They are offering the Dominion a choice." High Executor Varric nodded. "And a very human one." On the screen, Admiral Reyes delivered the final words. "You can fight us here. 8,000 ships against 35,000. And millions more drones and missiles." She folded her hands behind her back. "Or you can stand down." Her voice was calm, measured, because humanity did not come here for revenge. She looked directly at Zirith. "We came to make sure Haven 7 never happens again." For several long seconds, no one spoke. Then Zirith Kal slowly lowered his head. And something that had not happened in Dominion history for 3 centuries finally occurred. The core defense fleet began powering down its weapons. Across the galaxy, every observer realized the same thing. Humanity had just won a war without destroying a single homeworld. They had demonstrated power so overwhelming that even the Dominion chose survival over pride. But the true lesson of the war was only beginning. The moment the Dominion core fleet powered down its weapons, a silence spread across the galaxy. Not the quiet of empty space, but the heavy silence that follows when an entire civilization realizes the rules have changed. 35,000 human warships hung in the darkness beyond the Krith capital system, their engines glowing faintly against the distant stars. They did not advance. They did not fire. They simply waited. Inside the Dominion War Citadel, Warlord Zirith Kal stood before the command window overlooking his homeworld. For the first time in his long career, the Dominion warlord faced something he could not solve with conquest. His empire still possessed enormous strength, millions of soldiers, thousands of ships, entire worlds under Dominion rule. Yet in that moment, all of it felt fragile, because the humans had proven something far more dangerous than brute force. They had proven control. They had destroyed shipyards, defense grids, and communications hubs with surgical precision. They had dismantled fleets without slaughtering them. They had brought the Dominion to the edge of collapse, and then stopped. Zirith turned toward the communication screen where Admiral Helena Reyes still waited. "You could destroy us," he said slowly. Reyes shook her head. "No, you misunderstand. We could destroy your war machine." Her voice remained steady. "But destroying your civilization would make us no better than the empire that burned Haven 7. Zirith studied her expression carefully. "You fought this war with restraint." "Yes. Why?" Reyes did not answer immediately. Instead, she gestured toward the stars. "Because humanity has seen what happens when wars go too far." Across the galaxy, the Galactic Assembly listened in total silence. Every representative understood that the outcome of this conversation would reshape interstellar politics for generations. High Executor Varric Tell leaned forward slightly. For centuries, the Assembly had attempted to maintain peace through diplomacy and trade agreements. Yet, when the Dominion destroyed Haven 7, those agreements had meant nothing. And now a young species had done something the Assembly never could. They had enforced a line. Back aboard the Resolute, Admiral Reyes stepped closer to the camera. "When humans first reached space," she said quietly, "we believed other civilizations would be wiser than we were." She allowed herself a faint, tired smile. "We were wrong." Images appeared on the screen behind her. Footage from Earth's ancient wars. Cities reduced to rubble. Clouds shaped like terrible mushrooms rising over distant horizons. "We nearly destroyed ourselves many times," she continued. "Eventually we learned something important." Zirith narrowed his eyes. "What?" Reyes answered simply. "Power without restraint leads to extinction." She gestured toward the massive human armada surrounding her ship. "These fleets exist for one purpose, not conquest, not expansion." She paused. "Protection," the Assembly chamber murmured quietly. Because for the first time, humanity had revealed the true philosophy behind its hidden war doctrine. The fleets had never been designed to conquer territory. They were designed to ensure that if someone crossed a certain line, there would be consequences powerful enough to stop it from ever happening again. Zirith Kal remained silent for a long moment. Finally, he spoke. "What happens now?" Reyes answered immediately. "Your fleets stand down. All Dominion expansion stops beyond your current borders. You compensate the survivors of Haven 7, and the Dominion signs a treaty recognizing civilian colonies as protected zones." The warlord's eyes burned with restrained anger. "You are dictating terms to the Dominion." Reyes nodded. "Yes." The room fell silent again. But Zirith understood the reality of the situation. The human fleets had already proven they could dismantle his empire's military infrastructure, and they had done it without targeting civilian populations. If the war continued, the Dominion would survive, but it would be crippled for generations. Slowly, reluctantly, Zereth lowered his head. The Dominion will accept these terms. Across the galaxy, the tension finally broke. Dozens of civilizations in the assembly chamber released quiet sighs of relief. War between two major powers had ended without the destruction of entire worlds. Something almost unheard of in galactic history. High Executor Varric turned to Ambassador Kelsorin. "They could have ruled the Dominion," he said quietly. Kelsorin nodded, but they chose not to. Meanwhile, the massive human fleets began powering down weapons. Formation by formation, thousands of ships slowly turned away from the Dominion capital system, not as conquerors leaving occupied territory, but as guardians returning to watchful silence. Weeks later, a joint summit was held in neutral assembly space. Human diplomats, Dominion representatives, leaders from dozens of other civilizations. The Treaty of Haven 7 was signed there. For the first time in galactic history, an agreement established clear protections for civilian colonies across all known space. Any empire that destroyed a non-military settlement would face collective retaliation, not from the assembly, but from the one civilization that had proven it was willing to enforce the rule: humanity. Years passed. Trade resumed. Borders stabilized. The Dominion never again attacked a frontier colony. Other empires became more careful. And slowly, a strange new balance formed across the Lyrian spiral. Not one built on fear of conquest, but fear of crossing a line humanity would not tolerate. Decades later, High Executor Varric, now old and nearing the end of his life, stood once more in the assembly observation chamber. The stars outside burned as quietly as they always had. Ambassador Kelsorin joined him. "You are thinking about Haven 7, Kelsorin said. Varric nodded. "For centuries, we believed humanity was weak." Kelsorin looked out at the distant stars. "Perhaps we misunderstood what strength actually looks like." Varric watched a formation of human ships pass quietly through assembly space. Not warships this time. Exploration vessels, medical transports, terraforming platforms, helping young colonies survive, helping broken worlds heal. "They are a strange species," Varric said softly. "Yes, capable of enormous destruction." Kelsorin nodded. "And yet," Varric finished the thought, "they prefer to build." Far away, in the Haven system, a new colony had been established. The planet once called Haven 7 was still scarred, but green life had returned to its surface. Cities were rising again. Families had come back, not to forget what happened, but to prove that destruction would not be the final chapter. At the center of the rebuilt capital stood a monument, a simple inscription carved into dark stone, words written in dozens of languages so every species could understand them. "If you burn our homes, we will stop you. If you threaten the innocent, we will stand against you. But if you choose peace, you will find no better friend than humanity." And across the galaxy, no one ever doubted those words again. The end